I was trying to tell my mom the 4 stories that you shared when you were sworn in. And I was trying to remember how to give them. And this isn't about politics. This is about God sovereignly touching somebody's life, taking them from somewhere and bringing them somewhere. Yes, God bless our children, our little history makers as you go. First of all, let's start here. What happened to you? It was a landslide victory, historical victory. What happened? Let's start there.
In the election?
Yeah, the election.
Well, yeah, I mean, we we won with over 57% of the vote on March 4th. Yeah, which is the largest margin of victory that any politician in Durham has had since 1950. So it was a very decisive win, and one that I think was a testament to our hard work in bringing a lot of people together, and a lot of people who maybe have never voted for the Conservative Party before, but they believed that it is due time for change in this country, and that we can be, a voice for that change. So we came into Ottawa with a lot of momentum, and Monday, the swearing in, where you saw the video of, was my first real day on the job. Like, I've been working for the past month, but I couldn't vote in Parliament or take my seat in the House of Commons until Monday. So the ceremony that we had was what made that official. And it was very, very cool to have so many people from the church here, there in Ottawa. My job is basically to try to bring the voice of our communities here in Durham to Ottawa and make sure that our needs and our desires for our community are reflected in the decisions that get made by legislators and policymakers. And so, having a strong presence from our community here at that swearing in, I think, was very important. And it sent a very strong message. The confidence that the worship team from History Makers had to not just sing, Waymaker on Parliament Hill, but to do so a cappella, no microphone, just to stand in front of 200 people and sing from the heart. It was beautiful. And I'll tell you, of the 200 or so people who were there, not all of them were Christian. We had a very diverse room, but even people who don't share our faith could experience the beauty of hearing the song, right?
Wow.
And I think that's like one thing that I've only been going to church for about 5 years now in my life. I'm relatively new to Christianity compared to many people here who've been going to church maybe their whole life. But I had a new appreciation for singing, I think, that day. Wow. Because in that building on Parliament Hill, you have a lot of people talking all the time. It's sort of a big part of our job, talk, right? And you try to say the truth and you try to say the right thing and you want to be a voice for change and positivity. But there is something about the beauty of singing that can just connect with people in a different way. That no matter how good your speech is or how prepared you are or how good your stories might be, there's just something about the sung word that has a very different connection to people. And I think that was very clear that day. So you guys were awesome. Thank you very much for everybody who came in. Yeah.
Jamil had actually wanted to come and thank us this way, and we are so appreciative. We were so honored. But how did you, I'm just tracking this morning with the Lord, I think. Again, very impromptu, but let me ask you a few questions. How did you come to know Christ? You're a professing Christian. How did it happen?
Yeah, so it came through a dramatic transformation, and Pastor Melanie, it was actually at a time where I was wearing a neck brace exactly like yours. So I think I've mentioned to the church before, I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma at the age of 30. And it was like hitting a brick wall in my life. Because when you're in your 20s, you're just like, oh, I'm healthy, I can do whatever I want, I don't have to sleep. You take for granted your health. So when I got diagnosed with cancer, which came out of the blue, I just went to the hospital thinking I had the flu or something. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And they found a tumor had been growing in my left side, and it actually grew into my spine and cracked it in 2 places. So that's why I had a neck brace like yours. It was through that experience that I learned about God and how to pray and how to read scripture and became part of a church community. But the church community itself, which was, it's called Kingdom House Christian Center in Brampton. The pastor there, Pastor Rob Meikle, is good friends with our pastor here, Derek.
He was also there and gave incredible testimony to the Lord Jesus Christ at the swearing in. Pastor Rob Meikle is becoming a friend to us now.
Yeah. And Pastor Derek and Pastor Rob are part of a network, the Ministers Network, full of some incredible pastors across Canada. And it was through Pinball Clemens that I met Pastor Rob. One of the stories that I had told at the swearing in was I had written my book, I had drafted it, and I was looking for a celebrity endorsement. So, just someone who can help you sell the book, right? So I went to a Christmas party that I heard Pinball Clemens is going to be at.
And who is Pinball Clemens for people like me who are out of the loop a bit?
Yeah, sorry, if you're not a sports fan, you might not know him. So he was a Toronto Argonauts legend. He was the running back on the team in the 1990s when they won several championships. And he went on to be the first championship-winning black head coach in the CFL. He also now is the general manager for the Toronto Argonauts. So he is the most Canadian American, I think, in the world. Because he's from Florida, but he's been in Canada for decades now, and he loves this country. He's a real patriot and a great man. And so I saw him at this Christmas party, and I'd asked him, hey, would you consider endorsing my book? Could I send you a copy? And he said, yeah. And when you meet someone famous like that, you're like, I'm probably never going to hear from him again. But I sent him a copy of the book, and he messaged me back a few weeks later and said, hey, I read your book over Christmas. I liked it. I'd like to endorse it. Do you want to come to my house and we can watch football and talk about it? So I said, of course. So I was like, right, obviously. And
get my friend Pastor Derek come.
Yeah. And so I said, what's your address? And he goes, actually, why don't you meet me at church before the football game? And I said, okay. And at that time, I was not going to church. I was not a Christian. But, he asked me to meet him there. So I said, sure. And I showed up to church, and I showed up on time. He did not. And so for the first about 30 minutes, I was there, and I didn't know anyone. But it's, Kingdom House in Brampton is very similar to History Makers here, which is that if you're there for the first time, as Pastor Derek says, you are the VIP. So I didn't know anyone, but I'm sitting there, and it's like the friendliest place on earth. Like, people keep coming up to me, hi, welcome to church, nice to meet you. And those people I met that morning waiting for pinball were the people who were the community that got me through cancer. They wound up being a rock for me and my mother and my sisters. And so that is how I learned about God and how I became a Christian. And one thing that I have noticed is that, a lot of Christians sometimes are nervous to bring our faith to public life because not everyone may agree with us on everything. And, there's obviously strong differences of opinion on a lot of issues. And certainly in my work in politics, that's also true. But I have found, and the number of supporters we got in that election backs that up. We won a large majority, including people who were Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Jewish, atheists, agnostics, people who aren't necessarily in agreement with us on everything, but appreciate people who tell the truth and work hard and want to do the right thing.
Values bring together sometimes a common unity that creates enough of a critical mass to actually change a nation. That's what we're seeing. Wow.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I thought was very important about the ceremony that the worship team participated in on Monday, which was to be confident in our beliefs and confident in our values, to know that being honest and straightforward with people is a big part of being able to make a difference for our community. You don't have to hide who you are. You don't have to hide what's important to you. You don't have to hide your convictions. In fact, a lot of people who might disagree with you on things respect when you show people who you are, because what they want is people who are honest and clear and upfront, right? So I have found since the election the last month, it has been an incredible experience so far, and one that has only affirmed to me that I believe that our community here in Durham Region is going through a very interesting time in our history, where we have a lot of people who are moving into Durham Region for the first time because of the cost of living being even higher in places like Scarborough and Mississauga. Even people moving from Ajax, moving further east into Oshawa and Bowmanville. And what I see happening right now is a need for us to understand what this means, not only for our relationships with each other now and how we all live together now, but how do we have a plan for the future of this community? People are struggling in this economy right now. I don't need to tell you that. I mean, we've had many conversations I've had with you guys about this before. We don't have enough houses for people, right? Young people are concerned about their ability to move out and start a family. Frankly, taxes are too high and they're too aggressive because they're not just focused on the big corporations. They're taxing people for buying food and gas and heating their houses. It is tough out here right now. And I think if we're going to overcome these challenges, we're going to have to figure out how we can all be our authentic selves with each other and learn how to make decisions with people who might not agree with us on everything, but agree with us on the best things for our kids.
Jamil, you mentioned confidence a moment ago, and we certainly felt the intimidation factor. We can tend to get so bottlenecked in our churches, shouting about changing the nation and worship over the nation and all of that. But what I'm learning in this process with you is that you have to get a seat at the table to create change. And your confidence, the way you walked into the room for the swearing-in ceremony stayed with me. And I wanted to ask you about it, but I didn't want to take up your time because you were busy with the guy from Bell, I think.
Yeah.
He was busy fighting the powers. I didn't want to phone him and ask about how he walked into the room. You walked, and I've walked into some rooms, and you came in differently, and that stayed with me. You walked in to a full room, and you'd think you would feel you still have something to prove. And you walk in, and I think you said something like, "What up, peeps?" Yeah. And the whole place stands and claps, and I thought, now I have never walked into a room that way. And I thought, this is actually an honest question. What gave you the confidence that you carried into that room? What was it? You were just so terrified that what up, or are you comfortable in the place God has put you? Sorry.
Yes, I am comfortable, or at least I most of the time, and I think it's because of two things. So first off, I went into politics, and I came to History Makers shortly after this started. So you guys have sort of seen this unfold over the last year. But I went into politics very clear with myself, which is that I was not going to be a potted plant, right? I wasn't just going to sit there and let it all happen around me. But I was going to ask for this job and ask for the votes of our community because I wanted to be some kind of a difference maker. And so to do that, you have to just show people who you are, and you have to be comfortable with who you are, and you can't hide yourself from the judgment or criticism of others, right?
So you chose authenticity.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a good lesson for us.
Yeah.
Going into the world, being our authentic selves.
Yeah. And just the other thing I would add is, and some of you in this room have helped me with this, but I have not, in the last 12 months, I've knocked on over 100,000 doors in our community. I talk to people to their face, out their doorstep all the time. Sometimes I get a pleasant reception, sometimes I don't. And frankly, I appreciate it all. Whatever someone wants to share with me, whether they're agreeing with me in a political realm or not, I'm totally cool with that, because I need to know what our community wants. I need to hear from people. And that is also where my confidence comes from. Like, no matter what the media writes, no matter what they say on television or whatever, none of that is going to tell me what our community wants. It's the people who live here who will tell me. And I won't be swayed from what I think is the right thing to do just because of the pressure or opinions of others. I was elected by this particular area, and this is the area that I care about. This is the area I represent, and that's where my confidence comes from. I know what the majority of people in our community want, and that's what I fight for.
Wow. Authenticity and leadership, eh? Now, you were told as a young person, I heard this when you shared, that you were illiterate.
Yeah.
And yet, Dr. Leslie Lewis gets up there and says he's a graduate of Yale. Like, how do you get through Yale? And what did that mean for you? That journey from being told something, did you believe I'll never amount to anything? How do you reconcile this? And how did you get through Yale?
Yeah. So many of you might relate to this, maybe when you were students, maybe you know students now who are in this experience, but we often define our abilities when we're young based on what we see, right? So if you go to school and you don't do well, you think you can't do well. I'm not good at math, or I'm not good at English, or I'm not good at science, or whatever it might be. But a lot of what happens to us when we're kids is environmental and circumstantial. So when I was failing in school and I had failed the literacy test in grade 10 and I was told you can't read and write at grade level and you can't do math at your grade level, and I was far behind my peer group, I was very depressed and down as a kid. If you asked me back then when I was a teenager, what were you going to be? I mean, I had no sense of my future, and I was making very reckless decisions, getting suspended from school, getting into fights. I had friends in and out of jail. It was a very difficult time. When I had left my mom's house and got a job and started living on my own, my environment and my circumstances changed. And that is when I started to do much better academically. And I am grateful for having the right adults in my life at that time who did not give up on me and did not define me based on my circumstances the way I had done myself. And I credit my mother primarily for that. So that was a big part of the transformation. And very quickly, I went from being considered illiterate at 16 years old to having a full scholarship to Yale University at 22. It was a very quick transformation. And and a lot of that was just not getting stuck, because life gets hard and you just got to believe it can get better, and you need to have people around you who believe it can get better.
Yeah.
So,
speaking of people around you, your mother was sitting there on the front row. She couldn't hide her tears. And you got up and you said something about a PS2 a video game system.
Yeah.
What kind of woman is your mother? Can you tell that story?
Yeah. So those of you who are raised by single moms, or maybe you are a single mom, it is very hard, I think, for a kid to articulate what a single mom means, because she was your whole life, right? When you were a kid, everything you had was of her. So I told this story there just to sort of give some perspective on what she meant to me as a kid. And it was a story about this PlayStation 2. So when I was growing up, me and my sisters, we were always sort of behind on the latest video game system. So when all my friends had a Super Nintendo, we had regular Nintendo. And then when we got Super Nintendo, everyone had Nintendo 64. So when I was 12 is when the PlayStation 2 came out. And I had this goal the year beforehand that I was gonna save up all the money I could and buy it so I could be the first kid in my class with the new PlayStation. And I saved for a year, birthday money, Christmas money, Canadian Tire money, everything I could come up with. And we get to the October, which is the month that the PlayStation was coming out, and I just didn't have enough, nowhere near enough money. So I go to my mom and I said, "Hey mom, I know I told you I wanted the PlayStation 2, but I don't have enough money." And she just says to me "Oh, you're gonna get it." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "I've been saving this whole year too." And so I always get choked up when I think about that, because my mom, I always say, was back to a sports reference, but a clutch performer. Game 7, the championship's on the line, that's when my mom shows up, And And there were a lot of moments like that where, despite having difficulties growing up, there were those moments where you just needed someone to show you were loved, and you needed someone to show you were equal and that you were valued, and she was just there in those moments. And those are the kind of small things that, you know, when you think about someone's life, or you look at their, you know, their social media, or you look at their bio, like, you don't see those kind of small things, but those were the things that made the difference. And when I was thinking about, you know, taking my seat in Parliament, that's one of the stories I want to tell, just to show people, like, those small interactions you have with people where they show you kindness, and then they're there for you and you're not there for yourself, like, that's what makes you who you are. And those are the small things that got me to where I am today. If my mom wasn't there in those key moments, I certainly wouldn't be here right now, so.
Well, you got us all thinking about our moms. So, love you, Mom. Thank you for everything. You also told a story that was highly unique. If you understand the favor of God on someone's life, and what we call destiny trajectory, the way you are to go, you end up somehow encountering Pinball Clemens. You end up in this situation, in that situation, and when you look back, you begin to see a pattern where the hand of God was upon you clearly. But when you shared these stories at your swearing in, you said, I want to tell the urinal story.
Yeah.
And I thought, what in the world is he about to say? Can you tell our church? Because this is one of those moments. I know these moments. I see them in people's lives, and I've experienced them. Is it true you ended up at a urinal next to Jordan Peterson?
I did, yeah. So this is, so I, you know, I was at an event in Toronto, and Jordan Peterson did a talk there. For those of you who don't know him, you probably all do, but he is a former University of Toronto professor who went on to become one of the best-selling authors in the world, writing about many of the psychological issues that face people in modern life and giving people a lot of advice on how to overcome them. And so I was at this event where he was giving a talk, and after the event, I went to the bathroom, and I was at the urinal. And as I'm sure many men in the room can attest to, the urinal is not really a place for conversation. So
what was the rule? The urinal rule?
You know, the rule is like, you look straight, you stare at the wall.
You don't look, it's biblical. Don't look to your left or to your right.
Yeah.
It's biblical.
Yeah. And, but I looked to my right and I saw Jordan Peterson was there. So I just said, you know, and it was awkward, but I said, oh, like, good talk, Dr. Peterson. And eventually I used the same line on him that I used on pinball, which is, hey, my name is Jamil, I wrote a book, and I send you a copy. And he said, sure, and he gave me an address to send him a book. And I got invited onto his podcast after that, and it helped my book get a much bigger audience.
You just have to know how incredible that is, to be invited onto Jordan Peterson's podcast. Look, that is just the big leagues.
Yeah. But the reason I tell that story is just to, as Pastor Derek was saying, just to provide another example of just kind of how random life can be, and that the people just being kind and generous to you in moments that that they don't have to be, actually goes a very long way. And that was doing that podcast, and, you know, some of the media that came out of that was a big part of moving my career forward. And it all came back to just having the guts to start a conversation at the urinal. So, yeah.
Opportunity. That's where I met Bobby Connor. And I asked him to lay hands on me. It's a true story. And he said, well, let me wash my hands and I'll meet you outside. It's a true story. So you never know where God will create a destiny moment. You shared about somebody who was part of your campaign who was in a car accident.
Yeah.
Who was that? What was their role in the campaign?
He was just a volunteer, like someone who came out to knock on doors. We had a lot of people who, made that sacrifice in their time for us, and he was one of them. And he was just a young man in his late 20s, hardworking guy, recent university graduate. The story I told is he got into a car accident on his way to our campaign one day, and I got a call from someone saying, Tack Deer, what is his name? That Tack Deer has been in a car accident, and when someone calls you and says that, you're like, you think the worst, right? It's a very heart-wrenching moment. And I found out that it was a minor injury, but he had to be taken to the hospital. So I drive over there, and by the time I get there, he's gone. Like, the car's gone and the police are gone, but there was a firefighter still there. So I walk over to the firefighter, and this is the off King Street in Bowmanville, the fire station there. So I go over to him and I say, hey, I heard there's an accident. Do you know where I can find the gentleman who got hurt? And he says, the paramedics just took him to the Bowmanville hospital. I said, okay. So I go to walk back to the car. He goes, hold on, wait a minute. He goes, are you Jamil Jivani? And I said, yeah. And he goes, your volunteer was just talking about you. And I'm like, what do you mean? And it turns out that Tack Deer, while he was waiting for the ambulance, was continuing to campaign with a separated shoulder and letting the first responders know about our election coming up. And I told that story just to show people, the dedication we had from our team here in Durham was amazing. And not even a car accident, a separated shoulder slowed these guys down. So, it's very humbling when you, as the member of parliament, my face is on the stuff and my name is on the stuff and I'm the one who's, on TV and all that. But it's people like that who make all that possible, right? We would not have won that election if not for the work of those volunteers. So it was just a good moment to crystallize the dedication and commitment of a lot of people.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
On this journey, and man, it was so wild watching you walk into Parliament and they announcing you and all that's gone on. Are you conscious of God's hand with you? Does God get involved in these things? Is he wanting to see his kingdom come in Canada? Did you have moments where you were consciously aware that God was working with you?
The honest answer is I don't know. I pray about it, and I just pray that I can do a good job and make good choices. But there are moments right now that do, I think, stand out to me as an important time for Christians to be vocal and to stand up. And I'll give you an example. Since 2021, we have had dozens and dozens and dozens of churches burned in this country. People don't really talk about it. It's happened in all across the country, Western Canada, Eastern Canada. And, we sort of just sit back and watch it unfold. Our community as Christians and also the political process doesn't really prioritize vandalism of churches, intimidation of Christians. And so when I see things like that happen, it definitely stands out to me as we need people to talk about what's going on here. I hear from Christian parents all the time, as well as Muslim, Hindu, Jewish parents who are concerned that their kids are being taught things in schools that are completely contrary to their own values. And they will say, well, as a mother or as a father, do I have the right to teach my own culture, my own traditions, my own faith to my kids? Why is the government getting involved in that? Why does it seem like the school system is standing in the way of me and my kids and trying to make me look like the bad guy for having an opinion on this? So I hear those things all the time, and I think as a Christian in public life, you do feel a calling to need to stand up for these things and say, we can't just watch this happen. So that's what I think about. I don't start in politics with presuming an understanding of the outcome, right? I want to do a good job every day and hope that at the end of the day, we've accomplished something.
Jamil, you've got a great heart. We see how God is using you. The role of the church in politics is a controversial one. And I attended some meetings that you invited myself and some others to. I found it staggering, the absence of pastoral presence at the meetings. And not shooting at any pastors. That's not what this kind of last question is about. But there's a fear there, I think, or a numbness perhaps of getting involved. I really don't know why they don't get involved. I know pastors are busy, but we are called to bring the influence of God, the values of the Bible into society, and the government sphere is just one of those that we're wanting to be involved in. So the question becomes, what is the role of the church at this time? How can we be involved with the influence of government in the right direction?
Well, I mean, we have a democracy in this country. I mean, it's not perfect by any means. But the reality is that we select our representatives, and we have the ability to put pressure on our representatives to make decisions that we think are best for our families and for our communities. Not enough people are taking advantage of that opportunity to influence these decisions. The truth is that voter turnout is not nearly as high anywhere in Canada as it should be. The truth is that the Christian community in particular is not organizing to have dialogue with politicians as much as I believe Christians should be. And the result of that is a lot of decisions that do not actually reflect the needs and desires of the broader population. This is how you wind up with what I would call elite and elitist politics, where a small number of people, nowhere near the majority, have a tremendous amount of say over our economy, over our culture, over our social safety net, and it is a problem. So I am nowhere near an expert on theology, and I would not pretend to be able to say to a pastor or to any Christian, this is what your religion tells you about politics. That's not my place. But what I will say is that as a citizen of the country, as a resident of Durham, you should want to use every lever at your disposal to make a positive impact on the world around you. That is my belief.
That is good.
So if that means showing up to vote, then vote. If that means helping educate your neighbors about different issues in the community, it means making the time to do that. If it means having dialogues with decision makers and authorities so that the vulnerable people who depend on churches for food and for sustenance and for counsel in every corner of Durham have their needs understood by people in authority, then that's a responsibility that I think every church should feel. You cannot expect the world to get better if you're not willing to do the work. And that goes for everyone, regardless of your faith. But if your faith is calling you, as I believe Christianity does, to love your neighbor and care about your neighbor, then you have to understand government and politics as an arena where you can do that.
Wow.
And that's what I would encourage.
We didn't plan to do this, and I'm still going to share a few things before you go today. But I knew Jamil was going to be here. He wanted to thank the congregation, and I brought you a book called Discovering the Purpose and Calling of Nations. And it taps into that God has an identity for a nation when it is born. And I think you'll really enjoy it. We want to say thank you to you for your work for God, your work in the community, and that you would be here today to share with us and give us a presence. And we're praying for you. We're praying for all of our government officials. And we're supportive and we love you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamil. I knew when Jamil crossed our path that God was also testing us. And God will test a church through the people that he sends. That's a reality. And how you will steward and care for people, one by one by one. How you will care for the single mother, how you will care for the politician, how you will care for the poor and underprivileged, how you will care for the celebrity. And I know that God tests churches in their early stages to keep them on track. And I knew God was doing that. And we must love the people that God sends our way. And I also wanted to learn. I wanted to learn some things from Jamil. Now here's what I've learned this morning. Are you ready with your notes? Here's what I've learned this morning. When you study the people that God uses, and when you study the lives of people who make history or make impact, they all have some things in common. And Jamil would fall into that category. Number one, they are people who were given great trial and suffering. And they have to choose to overcome or be crushed beneath it. It's common with all of them. I could give you sports figures, I could give you scientists, I could give you biblical heroes. They all had something that brought them to a place of I'm either going to meet this challenge and overcome, or I'm going to be crushed under it. And what happens is, so that's number one, and what happens is, when they choose to overcome and fight and push through, they don't realize it in the moment, but they're developing a thick skin. It's how God creates toughness in a person. You're not born tough. You're not born in full faith and trust in God. Whether you're Apostle Paul, Abraham, Moses, it's all the same story. They're put in situations that bring pain, and as they meet those challenges, they're developing a thick skin. Why? Because the thick skin that was developed in the trials is the thick skin they'll need in the triumphs to fulfill their call. God knows what you need to fulfill your destiny, so he's tracking with you. And that's why it's very dangerous to live a consistent life of comfort. It's very dangerous to live in comfort and make that your goal, because you'll be underdeveloped for the call of God on your life. So these guys will have, and gals, will have stories of failure, stories of controversy, stories of overcoming sickness, overcoming pain. Number two, a person who makes impact has the ability to recognize defining moments, game changer moments. You have the ability to see, here's what I must do in this situation. This is a game changer moment. We don't always recognize them. But the Apostle Paul would say, a great and effectual door has been opened to do something. Number two, they're able to recognize defining moments. All of you you took advantage of a defining moment when you came to this church. A door was opened and you took it. When you started that Mentoring Moms program, when you start Camp Grace, when all this reach that we're having, is because somebody gave God their yes and recognized a defining moment. Number 3, people who make impact are people who recognize and seize opportunity. It's an underwhelming statement. Sure, recognize and seize opportunity. Yeah. No. Not everybody has eyes to recognize opportunity. I wonder what percentage it would have been in this room, and it'd be only the men who would end up at the urinal. But I wonder what ratio in this room would have turned to Jordan Peterson and said nothing, or would have turned and said, "Oh my gosh, you're my hero," and then become intimidated. Or number 3, had the eye to say, "I've got a book that you don't need to ever read, but I'm going to send it to you." Believe it or not, a small percentage in this room would have done that. And we don't realize that God opens up opportunities every day for those who seize them. The one who prays for the waitress at the restaurant. The one who jumps without a parachute and starts that business. These opportunities, for me it was Amsterdam in Europe. I did everything I could to remain seated in my seat, and I said, I will not go over to that man. God knows where I live. He can find me. Missing an opportunity. Somehow jumped out of my seat, somehow found my way over to him, started crying and said, "Would you lay hands on me? We need this in North America." Hands were laid. The Lord said, "I'm going to use you," and the rest is history. From one opportunity, what number are we on? Now we're on 4. Okay, so this brings us to number 4. Little moments can create lifelong impact. Seizing these small moments at a urinal, at a party, can produce lifelong impact. That should be enough motivation for you to seize opportunities and look for opportunities. Look for an opportunity to love your neighbor. You know why we don't love our neighbors? Other than systemic selfishness in our Western culture, fear. I can trace it back. Every time you weren't there for your neighbor or didn't stand up and do something or won't evangelize, can trace it back to fear. Fear. And what you're finding is that the world is becoming more bold than we are. When the Bible says the righteous are as bold as a lion. Which brings us to number 5. What I learned from what Jamil said today. Confidence is key. Just so you think you didn't get any scripture this morning. Hebrews 10:32. And do not I've been giving scripture all the way along. I just didn't give the references. And do not throw away your confidence, for it is of great reward. What's the reward of confidence? And Jamil will need this. He's just starting out in this season, in this stage he's at. Paul goes on to give the reward of confidence, what it is. Do not throw away your confidence. It has great reward, for you have need of endurance. You have need of endurance. And in the Greek, that word confidence depicts a marathon runner. This is literally the original language if you study it. Depicts a marathon runner who has the guts to talk under his or her breath while they're running the marathon. I can do this. I got this. Greater is he who is in me than he that is in the world. God, you've not brought me this far to fail. God, help me in this situation. You alone are worthy. The bad is not mine. The good is not mine. It all belongs to you. I was born for this. You've given me a future, a purpose, and a hope. I will trust in the Lord with all my heart and lean not on my own understanding. I will acknowledge you in all my ways. Make my path straight. Do not throw away your confidence. Believers should be the most confident people. But if you're confident in self, you will become fearful before man. If you're confident in God, you will become bold before man. What number are we on? And what time is it? Okay, we'll wrap it up. Do you want one or two more? One more? Well, I learned from Jamil this morning. Authenticity is godliness. This guy walked into that room and said, "What up, peeps?" And he's brilliant. Like, this wasn't youthful cockiness. It's the kind of confidence that comes when you know who you are and why you're there. Believe me, I had to do that morning too on a small level when I had to sing the first verse of To God Be the Glory a cappella. How can I say thanks? I must have gone over to Perry and Don 20 times. Give me the key again. How can I? Give me the... No. He said, "I didn't know you could sing that well." Well, thank you for your trust. Yeah. And then, to God be the glory, to God. And there's like, there's no music. There's no microphone. If he asked me to preach, I would have been confident. I did. I did. And so even I myself, on a very tiny level that morning, had to say, I know who I am, I know why I'm here. And I'm a dead man anyways. My life is given over to God. So that's number 6. Authenticity is godliness. You know why? Because God knows who you authentically are, and He made you authentically that way. So be the original painting and not the copycat. Don't please people to the point that you are no longer the original Mona Lisa, whoever she was. So that's number 6, right? Authenticity is godliness. Number 7. We'll do one more. The world belongs to those who show up. The world belongs to those who show up. It doesn't have to be politics. When it comes to kingdom influence, God is not going to come down from heaven and do what He's asked you to do. God is not going to come off of His throne and come down and do what He's called you to do. If you are alive and breathing today, it's because He has something for you to do. Otherwise, He can take you quickly. Dr. Miles Monroe finished his work, so he was taken quickly. But you who are here, we have a job to do. Let's do one more. What number are we on? 8. You have a calling, purpose, and destiny as an individual. You have a calling, purpose, and destiny as an individual. I know you're part of the collective group, you're part of that group or this church or that church, but did you know that you have your own identity, you have your own call from God, you have your own purpose and your own ultimate destiny? You are important to God. You matter. God is not going to come down and do for you what He's told you already to do. How many points was that? 8. Okay, let's do one more. 9. 9. The role of mentorship is crucial. You need people beside you and people above you. You need people beside you and above you. You need people beside you who know you better than the people above you. Those are people you trust, friends. Then you need people above you who can say no to you. And I've said that too. I have more accountability now than I ever did before. I've got fathers, accountability. I've got leadership in my life who know me and who know every detail. But not just for safety. But God will bring people across your path that you're to learn something from. Sometimes we go into relational encounters wanting to do all the talking. It's about what you're going to say to them. But I want to tell you a great secret, and my mentor wrote a book on it, The Art of Asking Questions. Wrote a book on the art of asking questions. And I learned that it's more powerful to ask questions than to be talking. Ask questions. You can learn something from people. Ask. Ask questions. Have people in your life that know what you don't know so that you can ask questions. All right, number 9, and it's the last one, I promise. I gave my word. No, we're just doing, come back next week for 10. Here's 9. Oh, it's 10. Perfect. I did it. This will be 10. This will be 10. But I don't think you can handle 10, this one. There's a lot of charismatics in here. We just want God to do it all for us. I don't know if this one is suitable. Well, let me get off the stage then, at least. So I just said it to you in passing. It's not always about what God does, but it's about what you understand. I'm going to qualify that. It's not about what God does for you. It's about what you understand. No, the dimension of, just so you get your money's worth this morning, the dimension of knowledge and understanding and wisdom is of greater value than prayer and prophecy. Yesterday, I became mom and dad. Well, Pastor Sarah couldn't lift anything or do what she normally does. Man, do I appreciate her. That was, and I had to go to some place called Rona. Some place called Rona Plus in Whitby, I guess, and there's like potted stuff and gardening tools, and I was buying 4 cement slabs. And I know nothing about this. And so I'm trying to put these 4 cement slabs into a shopping cart, and it's not working at all because I didn't know there was a proper cart that could carry the cement slabs. So I just didn't know, so I couldn't act in wisdom. So somebody came and helped me. And you can be pastor and bishop, all whatever, but the guy that was the head and not the tail was the 19-year-old helper there at Rona. So on my way out, the lady says, "We can have someone help you to lift those slabs into your car." I said, No. I am the anointed man of God. I'm preaching tomorrow. I can lift the slabs as the Red Sea was parted. He is strong in our weakness. Well, guess what I found out? Needed to ask for help. Came down to what I knew, what I didn't know. So once I got to the vehicle, now I've opened up the back, and my precious wife left the back seat up, one of the back seats up, and I need it down, or maybe it was weighed and Dawn, because they were riding back there. And do you know, I can't fit everything in unless I get this little seat down. Not a problem. I'm the anointed man of God. Do you think I could figure out how to get this back seat down? And I got one slab in there. I'm standing there. The wind is blowing. The leaves are, and I'm in the name of Jesus seat. And I'm forcing this thing down. And I'm saying, gosh darn it, how did Wade get this thing down? Because the one seat was down, the other one wasn't. I'm trying everything. And I stand there, anointed, but ignorant. Just didn't know. So Wade became the anointed bishop in that situation. Because Wade knew how. Wade was the head and I was the tail. Do you see how this works? When it comes to head and not the tail in this world, it comes down to what you know. So I phoned my wife, and she didn't answer. She was resting. And I thought, how do I get this thing down? And it turns out there's a tiny little strap sitting right in front of me. And I just pulled it ever so. I didn't need prayer. I didn't need prophecy. I didn't need anointing. I just needed knowledge. And when I pulled it, I had the wisdom to load the cement slabs into the vehicle. It comes down to what you know and understand in this life. Amen?
History Makers School of Destiny is a new kind of school for a new season. Our History Makers 3-day trainings have proven transformational in individuals, cities, and even nations. Now imagine 9 months of this unique paradigm of training and equipping. The School of Destiny is designed to cater to your already busy schedule, offering a 3-day training event and one specialized elective on a monthly basis for 9 months. Through this specially choreographed, spirit-filled system of training, we are able to initiate a destiny doorway designed just for you. At the School of Destiny, the goal is not more information, but revelation and impartation that produces transformation. This brand new school offers both in-person and online participation. You will experience anointed worship, impartation, and strategic training. We want to equip you with the precise ingredients and the practical tools you need to fulfill your calling and make history. And that's not all. Graduates of the School of Destiny receive a blueprint strategy to make impact in their sphere of influence through our Society Small Group Initiative. We literally take you from vision to tangible result. We can't wait for you to meet our specialized instructors and real-life practitioners of the kingdom, and most importantly, to have a fresh encounter with the person of Jesus. Enrollment is happening now. We look forward to seeing you at the History Makers School of Destiny.